So Tom and I have been writing music for quite a while now.
For films, TV, video games, advertising and trailers,
And of course, all our work with Audio Imperia as well.
but today we're going to take you back to the basics.
If we were starting fresh,
From day one,
these are the top 5 composer secrets.
we wish we knew sooner,
We're going to break each one down for you.
so that you have everything you need to level up your...
Composing journey.
Alright, let's start off with modulation and expression. Let me play you this little mock-up first, and then we'll talk about it. If we removed all of that programming, let's take a look at the strings, for example. So for the strings, I only used modulation, but let's say we got rid of the modulation and we just set it somewhere like this. Say we just set the mod wheel somewhere, that was it. Or you can go detailed and draw in these curves, thinking about how the player would actually play, right? With the mod wheel, or you can use a fader device or something like that. For example, in the brass, that's the modulation all the way down. Bring it up. You can really hear that power. Now, if I just go for the expression, for example, if I got rid of this expression, and let's just do this, so top dynamic. So with the modulation, with modulation and dynamics, you're changing the timbre of how the players are playing, really intense and loud or soft and quiet. With the expression, that's an additional volume control, basically. So you can see I'm doing big curves here with the modulation, the dynamics, to really create that performance, and then the expression is just an additional volume control to maybe bring it even quieter, not all the way down to 0, but it just helps shape the performance a little bit more. So I would always say modulation and dynamics are your key main things that you need to focus on with any kind of long articulations, whether it's sustains, legatos, tremolos, etc., whatever. And then expression is an additional volume control shaping, rather than going onto your track and doing volume things like this, right? It's just, that becomes messy, and if you're copying MIDI over, you get this kind of thing, and that's just, we don't want that. So we keep that as it is, and then we use the expression here so that we're not actually affecting the volume of the actual track itself, if that makes sense. So that's how I like to think about modulation and expression.
Okay, so the first tip I want to show you is key switching. Have a little listen to this excerpt here. Star Wars fans may recognize this, but if you listen to it, it sounds a little bit flat, a little bit muddy, maybe a little bit unreal, indistinct. Let me show you what's going on here and explain a little bit about why this may not sound as good as it could do. Have a look at the excerpt. You can see at the moment I have no key switches triggering. I just have the sustain articulation, and it sounds okay, but maybe just lacks a little bit of realism. Have a listen to this. Now, if I activate my key switches, you're going to see that we alternate between the sustained and staccatissimo articulations, and just those simple changes between the two different types of articulations makes a massive difference. Have a listen to this. And you can see if I do the same for the rest of these brass parts, it's really going to bring the piece to life and just give it an extra enhanced feeling of playability and realism. Let me show you how this works in a slightly different ensemble. So here I have the violins from Araya, and I'm using just the sustain articulation here to play this short phrase. Have a listen to how this sounds. Same thing's going on here. It sounds okay, but it's just lacking a bit of realism and a bit of depth and a bit of dynamism. We can change that by simply using some key switches. So let me replay you this with these key switches activated, and you're going to see how just a few simple switches really brings this to life.
So we heard this little example in the modulation and expression tips. Now let's go into this one. Here I've added a sub bass, just a simple sine wave. You can create this with any kind of virtual synth. If you have any kind of synth where you can just load the like a sine wave, then that will sound fantastic. You can change it up and make it a bit different if you want, but it doesn't have to be anything super complex. The simpler the better. But you're not really going to hear this, but you'll feel it. Check this out now with the sub bass added. Now if we get rid of the sub bass, this is how it sounds. So that's that. Really simple, really straightforward, but it is used all the time in film scores, video game scores, anything. Any kind of cinematic music nowadays has probably got some kind of synth sub bass in there underneath to add that kind of cinematic Hollywood sound to the orchestra.
Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is using quantization and humanization to bring things to life or to make them sound a little bit more coherent. We're going to start with this example of the string ensemble from Dolce playing spiccatissimo, these short notes. And you're going to hear how this sounds good, but maybe just a little bit robotic. Now, most DAWs allow you to quantize or humanize things in subtle but meaningful ways. Cubase has some really good ways of doing this. If I come up to the quantization panel and open it, I can set the rhythm that I'm going to use. Here I'm using triplets. I have this panel here known as rough, and you can see it has this option called ticks. Now, ticks are how essentially out of time something is or how off grid something is. We don't want to use too many ticks, otherwise it's just going to make everything sound too out of time. It's going to make it sound a bit sloppy. But if we don't use any ticks, it may sound a little bit robotic. So maybe let's opt for something like 9 to 10. If I just choose 10 here and I come up and apply this to all our notes, watch what happens. I press quantize and everything just begins moving around a bit. This is just pushing everything a tiny bit around the grid. It's keeping to the basic rhythm, but it's moving everything a little bit around. And that's really going to help with just adding a touch of important but basic humanization to this. If I do this a few more times, I can choose if I want to, one I like. Let's just use this one and have a listen. It's subtle, but it does make a difference, particularly over prolonged sections. Things can get a bit robotic, a bit predictable. Adding some basic humanization can just make things sound a little bit more natural. Now, sometimes the converse might be true. You may play something in and it may sound pretty rough and pretty untimed. This particularly happens to me. Have a listen to this thing that I played in on Cerberus. It does not sound particularly good. As you can hear, it sounds a little bit ropey. Now, I could quantize this, in other words, snap everything to the grid, and that would work. It would make everything very uniform, but that may give us a little bit too much for rigidity, too much roboticness. We may want to find something in the middle. Watch what you can do. You can do this in Cubase, and this is great. This setting up here is called soft quantize. If I turn that on, what's going to happen is it's going to quantize things according to our setting here, the 16th notes. It's going to bring everything closer to the 16th note grid, but it's not going to bring it all the way into that grid. It's not going to make it completely robotic. It's going to still allow us to get closer, but a little bit off the grid. Watch, if I just move everything around and press Q a few times, everything's getting closer, but it's never quite aligning 100%. What this is going to do is really tighten everything that we've done, but still retain a touch of the human edge. I can just go in and I can make a few tiny changes. I can see one here has moved slightly where I don't want it to be. That's fine. Just do that again. Have a listen to how this sounds now. So as you can see, it's brought everything closer to the grid, but it hasn't completely snapped it to the grid. It's just moved everything a little bit more in line. The end result is something that sounds a lot more coherently played and played by a far better musician than me, but it still retains that human element, that touch of chaos and randomness that just gives everything a more musical feel.
Now let's take a look at layering libraries. So I have this example here. I have this pattern played by Araya Light Edition and Dolce Light Edition. And I'm going to show you how layering the two together can really give you a nice, unique sound. So here's Araya on its own, just how it is out of the box. I've just turned off the external reverb, so that is just the samples in the room with the modern mix. Now, if we want a bit more room adding to that, because that might be a bit too dry for certain things. It's great for a lot of kind of hybrid, maybe trailer music, but if you wanted something like this, maybe you want a bit more room sound, so you might add Dolce Light Edition to it. Here's Dolce on its own. And then on the other side of things, you might actually want to start off with the kind of sound of what Dolce gives you, but you maybe want a little bit more presence in there. So instead of turning up the close mic, you might layer something like this, which has a bit more of, like Araya has a slightly more aggressive quality. Let's keep this on a loop, and I'm going to layer in Araya Light Edition. Just turn up the volume until we like it. Now that we've blended the two together, if we listen to them together, it's going to kind of sound like one recorded string section. So there you go. Simple as that. But if you have two different types of libraries, with strings especially, with brass and woodwinds it's a little bit different, but with strings you can really get some cool sounds layering. And same with percussion, but with strings you can really augment the sound to exactly what you want. And you can have two libraries that have different characteristics. Maybe you like the bite and the precision of a drier library in a smaller room, but then the kind of the warmth and the bloom and maybe like the bigger low end that you get in a bigger room. That's when you maybe layer in something like this.